What we're going to talk about is really fun, right? We're talking about hospitality and technology. We're not talking about Bitcoin. We're not talking about traditional engineering efforts and product strategy, right? Like this is a higher level topic that's supposed to be really engaging and exciting, and truly bring kind of the warmth of hospitality into this conversation. So my name is Lisa Grimm. I'm a senior product manager at WeWork. I just landed last night from a 2-week trip in Tel Aviv and Copenhagen, a little bit for work, a little bit for pleasure. I'm a little bit jet lagged. I have a bit of a cough. So bear with me. We're going to get through this together. I might have to take some water breaks. I want you guys to think for a minute about the last time that someone did something nice for you. Unexpectedly nice for you, out of the blue. Anyone have something they want to share? Simple stuff. Your barista remembered your name. Someone picked up $1 that you dropped and returned it to you. Yeah?
I got a physical thank you card.
Oh, that is so nice. Was it from a friend?
It was from family.
Every now and then I get one from candidates that I interview, which is always like, wow.
But like it needs to go on my fridge.
Exactly, right? And then you have that experience where you're like, damn it, I wish I got more things in the mail. And you're like, wow, how did such a simple gesture turn around so quickly and like completely change a paradigm where you're like, I don't check my mail usually. I had something happen to me while I was traveling. One of the zippers on my bag was unzipped and someone came over and nothing fell out. It was just unzipped and someone came over to tell me that. And I was like, thank you, because that one had my passport in it. So really appreciate you letting me know. The reality is for most of us, this is a rarity, right? This idea of having like these random, spontaneous, like kind deeds from people. And you can kind of argue today that we're more focused on shuffling through life than we are really connecting with one another or going out of our way for other people. But I'm not here to talk about being disconnected, right? I want to talk about how as product managers, we can capture that kindness and that connection and bring that spirit of hospitality into the technology that we're building. Actually, with that in mind, can I just see hands of like anyone that's working kind of in product in the tech world right now? It's not a bad or a good thing. Cool. And anyone that's working in more of the hospitality space? Okay, cool. So we have a little bit of an overlap. I'm going to try to go slowly and explain anything kind of about product and tech that I've maybe made some assumptions about. But like I said, let me know if I've skipped anything. So I just got back from Tel Aviv, like I said. And while I was there, I noticed that people actually talked to one another. Did you notice this? Hannah was in Tel Aviv with me too. We worked together.
Yeah.
Support your colleagues.
Definitely noticed that.
Right? People talk to one another on the street. And I noticed it when I was waiting for a cab. And I was kind of shocked by this because as a New Yorker, it's really not something that we do all that well. But at the same time, I also was interested in figuring out why. And at first glance, it's pretty clear. No one's wearing headphones. No one's staring down at their phone. And I mean, this was like a real rarity. Everyone was just walking around without headphones. No one's looking at their phone. And I couldn't help but like kind of giggle a little bit, right? Because as New Yorkers, everyone has AirPods or headphones or whatever it is. And you don't really think about the connections that you miss when you're just focused on like the singular thing that's in front of you, right? The big difference here was that piece of technology. And although it's just one example, it's no surprise that technology really plays a role here. Although it's easier to connect than ever before using technology, those connections are often really surface level, right? Not necessarily meaningful, deep connections. Many of us, including myself, go through most of our day with literal or theoretical headphones on. When was the last time you were in a meeting and someone wasn't paying attention, but they were checking their Slack messages? Just a couple of hours ago, right? Like that happens all the time. Even though this incredibly disconnected world exists, a lot of the barriers for making meaningful connections with technology, for some people, making those connections and caring for one another is truly a selfish act, right? Anticipating both those expressed and those unexpressed needs of the people around them is what makes them tick. That's hospitality. For those of us in the industry in some capacity, you know that feeling. Hospitality is a spirit. It's hopeful, it's open-hearted, it's generous. It's about looking out instead of looking in. So today I'm going to talk about hospitality and technology, what it means, why it matters. We'll discuss some current applications of it, and most importantly, why I care so much about this, right? To do that, let's start with a very oversimplified timeline of my life. I went to school. Ooh, I did it. I went to Cornell. I studied industrial and labor relations, which is kind of a long way of explaining the world of work. We learned about things like labor economics, labor history, collective bargaining, organizational behavior, human resources, kind of the full gamut. And the reality is that although I really loved this education and it was really kind of motivating and engaging for me, I had no idea what I wanted to do afterwards. Most people turned it into kind of a pre-law degree, went on to law school. I knew that really just was not for me. I did an internship at Calvin Klein in the Human Resources Department. I worked for the UN for a year in the International Labor Organization, and I just did not know what was next, even after all of those experiences. I ended up joining a mid-sized management consulting firm called Katzenbach Partners. I was a college recruiter. Looking back, the only reason why I actually took this job was because I had an amazing interview experience. Everyone I talked to was really engaging, really bright, and really warm. In many ways, I wanted to be just like those people. As a recent college graduate, I was not any of those things. I was terrified to answer my desk phone. Yes, we still had desk phones. Think about it, right? I'm a college recruiter. I talk to people literally all day long, and I was so scared. But I got over it. And what I realized was that Katzenbach was everything that I hoped it would be. It was kind of this intellectual playground where everyone who walked in the door started with respect, started with an A+, and was expected to really kind of contribute to what we were working on. No matter what position you were, your contributions were considered right next to those of the founders of the firm. So Katzenbach was acquired by a much larger firm, and the culture and those connections lasted even beyond the actual firm itself. So still today, every 5 years, we have a reunion.
Oh.
We finance ourselves, we take ourselves out, and we throw ourselves a party. Because this was such a strong culture. There were such strong connections. And for us, it was all about kind of maintaining that and making sure we could collaborate and generally hang out together again. Katzenbach's culture was established from the beginning by its founders and then seeded with every new hire. We were a firm of about 250 people. We got applications from over 20% of Harvard's undergraduate class, amongst others. And our philosophy was that every interaction with an applicant, not just a candidate, but an applicant, had to be kind and humble. It took much longer for us to call every candidate and decline them and give them feedback than it would have been to send them an email. But that's how we did it. And our culture is what differentiated us from our competition. Our recruiting philosophy was a very big part of that. After Katzenbach was acquired, I started to understand that I was the type of person who really needed to be passionate about what I was doing. I was driven from that fire and that excitement of the love for my work. I grew up in a family that was always cooking and entertaining, and I was already kind of introduced to this concept of hospitality at Katzenbach. So I decided that I had to do some soul searching and kind of move into the restaurant industry to see what it was like. I joined a restaurant called Blue Hill. There are 2 locations. There's one here in Greenwich Village, and there's one in Westchester on a farm within the Rockefeller estate. It is a fascinating place where agriculture, sustainability, education, and hospitality all come together. While I was there, I insisted on working in all of the aspects of the farm and in the restaurant. So I covered all my bases, spending time training front of house, the events team, working on the farm, and with the educational program. The first time I watched dinner service at Blue Hill at Stone Barns, I was floored. It was a symphony that was perfectly choreographed. Every aspect complemented and highlighted the other. And their ethos freed them to be able to anticipate the needs of every single guest, right? No detail was too small, no extra was too costly. Dinner service was an act of generosity, and it showed. Blue Hill is still widely accepted, or celebrated, I should say, as one of the top restaurants in the world, and this was my formal introduction to the hospitality industry. Like I said, the guest experience at Blue Hill was nearly perfect, and I was craving the excitement of starting something fresh and not necessarily working in a really established place. So while most of my friends from consulting were going to get their MBAs, I went to go be a host and make $13 an hour, and I loved every minute of it. During the first couple of months after we opened, on any given night, I would talk to up to 800 guests. The restaurant on a good night sat 400, and we had that many people coming in and out of the doors for walk-in tables, for reservations, to sit at the bar, and then of course those that unfortunately we didn't have space to serve. One day, a very well-known celebrity event planner came in for a meeting with someone on the team. She sat in the 2 seats, if you've ever been to the Dutch, there are 2 seats right next to the host stand. And she sat there and just watched me talk to guests for a while. And at some point she came back to me and said, "Sorry to interrupt you. I can't believe how happy everyone is when you tell them no." And I was like, "What? They're happy?" And she was like, and she had this very, very like deadpan look on her face, right? And I was like, thank you, right? Like that's the biggest compliment you can give to someone in this position, right? And all I kept thinking about was my conversations as a recruiter having to turn down candidates, right? We could have said, "You're not a good fit," but we truly believe that when we couldn't offer a candidate a position, it was because we didn't have the right role to fit their skill set, right? So in thinking about the Dutch, I could have justifiably laughed when someone asked me for a table and they didn't have a reservation at the time. We were that busy, we were that packed. Who do you think you are? But of course, that was not the way that we approached it, right? And we had a lot of options. The reality was we were excited that these guests were excited to join us and we were excited to host them, right? So what we did was we tried to dig deep, find any options that we could to share the experience with them, whether it was waiting and coming back, grabbing a seat at the bar, or just in the long term trying to find them a reservation on a different date when we actually had time to serve them in the right way. The reality is, as hosts, we were constantly putting ourselves in our guests' shoes and anticipating their hunger and trying to arm ourselves with the right resources. Because I finally found something that I loved, the mix of energy and excitement and chaos of a bustling restaurant, I just pushed really hard at it. And eventually I became the director of guest relations for NoHo Hospitality. At the time we were opening the second restaurant, which was the Dutch. We ended up opening 8 restaurants in 5 years. I was a part of opening all of the new restaurants. I managed all of the maitre d' and the host staff and the reservations, the central reservations office. And this was customer service on steroids, right? This was really just endless. And I learned that no one is more desperate than a partner who has forgotten to make a Valentine's Day reservation. So be forewarned. As a growing restaurant group, we had trouble scaling our hospitality, right? The industry has very high turnover, and every time a server or a host left, we lost that historic relationship with our guests. The institutional knowledge was gone, and we were using some tools to capture this, but they were really rudimentary at best, right? Nothing that was really meeting our needs on the growing scale of the group. I was super frustrated by this pain point. But at the same time, there was a lot of startups in particular that were coming into the restaurant tech space and were really eager to build the right sort of systems to meet these problems. Things like point of sale, POS companies, reservation systems, even delivery services, waitlist only products, there's a number of them. So I really believe that the right tech could solve my problems at NoHo Hospitality and really elsewhere for the industry. I'll never forget that Resi pitched me by saying, "If you liked managing guest relations for 8 restaurants, we'll let you do it for thousands." They probably knew me better than I knew myself at the time. I should mention that I was hired as the director of hospitality for Resi. No one knew what that meant. Someone kind of sneezed my job description as the 7th employee, and we just kind of took it from there. So I tapped over the shoulders of enough engineers to say, "Hey, I don't think you're doing it right. We should build it this way." And in casual conversation one day, my CEO looked at me and said, "Well, you're the product manager. You should figure it out." What's a product manager? Okay, don't worry, I got this. We built Resi OS. So eventually I took over product for the whole restaurant side of the business. We built Resi OS, an operating system for restaurants, truly based on my experience, right? By the time that we had product market fit, we could actually grow Resi OS from our users' experience. Later on, we're going to talk about Resi a little bit more and some of the features we built there, so I'm going to keep this short. But after 3 very successful years, I wanted to dig deeper into technology and sharpen my product skill set. I needed to work with experienced PMs, challenge myself to learn outside of my comfort zone, and continue to push the limits of how tech and hospitality could work together. So during my orientation at WeWork, one of the presenters called WeWork a hospitality company. And I was like, you have got to be kidding me. I tried so hard to get out of my comfort zone, to try something new, and somehow I landed right back in hospitality. WeWork distinguishes itself in the marketplace with two main factors: scale, which really kind of is on a new level at WeWork, right? And hospitality, which at WeWork is very much about our community managers. They're the men and women who run our buildings. We often call them CMs as well. If you've ever been to a WeWork, you know that your CM will do anything. They'll fix any problem. They'll get you everything they need. They really are like the secret sauce. WeWork also takes the concept of scale to a whole new level. When I started, we were 7,000 employees. Just under 2 years ago, we're 14,000 now. We've doubled. When I settled in, it was clear that WeWork was experiencing the same growing pains that I was experiencing in NoHo Hospitality, but at a much faster pace, right? To solve this problem, we invested in technology, and we challenged ourselves to take what we already knew worked, the generosity and the warmth of our CMs, and reinforce that at scale using technology. Just like Resi, we're going to talk a little bit more about this experience later, so I'm going to keep it short. One thing that I've learned throughout my career is the power of storytelling. So in preparation for this presentation, I looked through a lot of other product school slide decks and got the sense of what people were doing, but I knew I wanted to do it a little bit differently. So with that in mind, we're going to keep the slides really light today. We're going to have much more conversation because inherently that's what hospitality is about. Now that you know who I am, let's get to good stuff. In my experience, there are two different types of relationships between technology and hospitality. On one side, there's tech that enables hospitality. This is the type of product that kicks off the process of unblocking, typically a person, to provide hospitality. Sometimes that type of product can also make it easier to provide hospitality by surfing information to the person on the other side that usually wouldn't have access to that and be able to deliver the same experience without it. Here's a simple way of thinking about this. If you've dined out lately, it's likely that a server has come up to your table and asked you, does anyone at the table have any allergies? I dread this question because I have a lot of allergies. And it's a long list. And obviously I don't want to have an allergic reaction to things, but at the same time, I hate that I have to list them out every time, right? It delays my friends from ordering, it interrupts our conversation. I have to hope that they don't come back to the table 3 more times to clarify the list. And it makes me really uncomfortable, right? It's constant interruption to our conversation. However, if I book a reservation and the reservation system allows me to input my allergies, the chef will often mark up a menu for me and bring it out. That's literally the opposite of being uncomfortable, right? That's an amazingly personalized experience, and it's a special experience that I now get to share with the restaurant. My conversation isn't interrupted. I get what I need. The restaurant has showed me that they really care about my experience, and it's essentially the exact same process that would have happened if I had to list out all of my allergies to the server. So in this instance, right, the server and the chef are delivering the hospitality, and the technology is just the plumbing for the overall experience. So that's one type of relationship between hospitality and technology, where the hospitality is delivered outside of the product. But the other approach is more self-contained. It's where the product embodies that spirit. The product in and of itself is hospitable. My favorite example of this is customer service portals. Everyone loves customer service. I see like half people smiling, so I'll take it as it's a good thing. So recently, my speakers on my laptop broke. This has happened multiple times to me. And there's a whole long way to do it that I don't remember, so I have to call Apple support each time. Search on Apple's website to find the number to call. The first thing they ask you to do is search for the problem that you're having. So I put in, bad speakers, whatever it was. The results were basic troubleshooting, right? Restart your computer, make sure your sound is on, make sure your Mac OS is up to date. I've done all those things. So I'm back to the support page, went through a different support flow. It was more like product and topic oriented, right? So it was select your product, okay, MacBook, then select MacBook Pro, then go through this process. And eventually I got to the same search page and I was like, no, it didn't work first time. But I went through another flow. And then I went to go look up how to just directly contact customer support, right? So when I did that, I'm not even kidding you. It was the same thing. And I was so frustrated, right? I was like, I have 30 minutes in between meetings where I finally have a break. I need to get my speakers fixed because I have a Zoom meeting coming up, right? I'm not going to get this done in time. Like, how is this happening to me? I just need to fix my speakers. I'll spare you the rest of the experience, but essentially, like, it reflects Apple's priorities, right? They're focused on efficiency and automation beyond and more than just my experience of needing to get help. In contrast, I had a question about my credit card. So I went onto Citi's portal and I chose to chat with someone virtually. I got a pop-up that said, hang with us, and within 5 seconds, I was talking to someone. That's magic, right? There was a person there. And it took a little time to like explain my issue. I would have had to do the same thing had I actually gotten successfully through the Apple support as well. Citi built a customer support product that puts my needs before theirs. As product professionals, our most important job is to fight for our users. So if you think about it, we're really best positioned to provide hospitality, right? We're also tasked with balancing deadlines, managing stakeholders, allocating resources, but we're not far from this concept of putting aside our own needs for this concept of, focusing on the needs of our users. After all, it's incredibly important to remember that we're not building products for ourselves. We're not building it for our team. We're not building it for our friends. We're building products for our users. If there's overlap, great. But that's always the primary focus. So now I'm really excited to tell you about some of the products and features that I've had a hand in building that bring these concepts to life. I'm going to start off with a real story that happened on my watch, but I've changed the names of the people involved. This is my friend Allie. Can we say hi, Allie? Hi. Thank you, guys. You're adorable. Allie made a reservation to celebrate her birthday, and when her parents found out, they decided to surprise her, and they wanted to pay for her meal. How sweet. They called the restaurant I was working at. We emailed them a form. They completed it and faxed it back to us. I'm not kidding. The form asked for all the details about the occasion, like when should we tell Allie that they're going to treat her to this meal? Should we, write down a message on like a handwritten note for her, including all of the payment and, contact details and all the logistics. So a reservationist who works in a different building from the restaurant received that form. She shared it and emailed it to the manager in the restaurant. And for good measure, she also called the restaurant and spoke to the host to say, hey, this reservation has a prepay. That's what we typically call this. Even after all of that, somehow Allie ended up paying for her dinner herself. What a disaster. This is the most wonderful experience where her parents are trying to share this with her and kind of bring them into this moment where they can't be there. And we messed it up. To this day, I honestly don't know where exactly the communication broke down, but it's easy to see how it could have broke down, right? Either the host didn't actually talk to the manager didn't communicate to the server didn't actually take care of the prepay and process it on that credit card. We as a team had an opportunity to deliver the highest level of hospitality, surprising someone with an incredible experience, connecting a family who couldn't be together physically for this amazing occasion, and we totally blew it. So I didn't know it at the time, but Allie was actually an engineer at Resi. So when I started at Resi, Allie told me this story my first week. Really great way to start off a new job. But as a startup, we were really focused on building the right foundational experience in Resi OS, which is this operating system of Resi that our restaurants use. It took us time to feel like feature-wise, we were at parity with our competitors. But eventually we got there. And when we did, we knew that we wanted to differentiate ourselves by building these features that restaurants never thought were possible. I often describe our roadmap in 3 separate categories. We had the sales-driven features, we had the keeping the lights on work, and then we have the things you didn't know we could do, right? That really exciting, innovative piece. But because we always wanted to stay in tune with what our clients needed, and that dictated our roadmap, sometimes it was actually hard to sell the innovation piece because they didn't even know they could have it, right? They weren't asking for it. I decided I was going to break some of the rules and shop around this idea of taking this prepay process that I knew was broken and building it into the product. Luckily, it worked. I clearly was not the only operator who had messed up a prepay before. And as soon as we started talking about it, people were clamoring for this feature. We talked to everyone involved, restaurants, guests, to make sure that we were capturing all the information restaurants needed to successfully. Oh, yes.
Rules that they're speaking about breaking, what do they entail?
The roles.
The rules. You said you broke some rules.
Yes, I broke some rules. The rules were, we would talk to our clients on a regular basis from either a perspective, right? You're a prospective client, we want to know what we're missing, right? That would get you to come onto the platform. Or as a current client, what's bothering you and what would potentially make you leave. So our roadmap was always driven by features that lots of restaurants wanted that to come onto the platform or to leave, right? So we usually prioritize things that we felt were missing with that current client base. The innovation piece is exciting, but at the same time, no one was asking for it, so they didn't even know it, right? So if we're trying to build things that our restaurants want, they're never going to bring up something that puts in the innovation bucket because they don't even know they can have it. Does that make sense? Yeah. So I had to, it was good reasons though. Good rule breaking. I'm glad you asked that. Thanks. So we were talking to all of our restaurants to make sure we had all of the right fields in the form, to make sure they had the information they needed every single time to be able to execute on this prepay successfully. We also talked to guests who had requested prepays to make sure that the form was very clear and we didn't miss anything that they felt was important to them, because it's possible those things were, different or mismatched. When we launched the feature, I felt relieved. Not that we launched on time or not that we were building this super innovative product. I felt relieved because I knew that prepays that were going through ResiOS would be executed more successfully. And the parents and the partners and the colleagues could be confident that their generosity would actually be shared with the recipient. In this feature, the way that we built it, anyone using ResiOS could actually see a prepaid form. We had this concept of a status, right? So you could see if it was sent and not completed. You can see if it was returned and not executed, right? So it was totally sharing this information, which meant that there was this shared accountability, right? Such so that so many things would have to fail in unison for this not to work. In the earlier example, the process was so incredibly brittle that any singular thing that went wrong, the entire house of cards would fall. Our goal was to build a product that anticipated the needs of all the parties in this equation, which guaranteed that our users could deliver the hospitality they intended to. For most of 2018, my squad at WeWork was focused on relaunching the WeWork app. It's the app that all of our members use, exclusive to members, to manage all of their experiences within our buildings. The code, the design system, the strategy were all outdated, and the product needed a new vision. As many of you probably know, relaunching a product can be difficult, for sure. It's also kind of risky. So we focused on the most heavily trafficked parts of the app, knowing that when we executed our initial vision, we had a long list of priorities to come back to. We hadn't optimized our onboarding experience. In fact, it hadn't been updated in 2 years. So we knew that was at the top of the list. Here's the romanticized experience of a new member joining WeWork. Someone at your company tells you you're moving offices. You get an email from WeWork that says, "Welcome, we're excited to have you." It asks you to download the app. You log into the app. You're asked about your skills, your interests, your profile, so that we can introduce you to the community. Sounds pretty good, right? Given the size of the team and the ever-changing priorities of an organization in hyper-growth mode, the onboarding flow was never updated post-launch. If the experience that we built met the needs of our members, this wouldn't be a problem. Unfortunately, it wasn't the case, and we really needed to iterate on this experience. So here's the actual experience of an average member moving into a new WeWork office. Someone at your company tells you you're moving offices. You get an email welcoming you that says to download the app. But you don't really download the app because the email doesn't give you any reason to. It just asks you to. Your company gives you the address of your new building, but the actual front door of the building is not the exact address that they're giving you. So on your first day, you wander into the wrong building, even though it's on the same block as the address provided, because remember, in New York at least, we have 60 buildings. I think we're actually over 60 now. When you finally make your way to the right place, you look really confused, and the security team at the building itself, not even at WeWork, the security team at the building, is kind enough to tell you where to go, what floor you're going to. Luckily, when you get there, there's a smiling CM waiting for you. Remember, we talked about them before. They're our secret sauce, and they make everything better. They ask you if you've downloaded the app, to which you say no, and then they ask you to do so you can register your key card, which you need right away to get into your office. So you download the app, you log in, you go through an onboarding flow. We talked about it before, skills, interests, profile. It takes you about 5 minutes. And then finally after that, you can actually register your key card, which was the only thing you were trying to do in the first place. Because remember, it's a day of work, and you have meetings and emails and a whole bunch of things to get to. So this is a long way of saying that the onboarding flow is all about what we wanted from our members at the time, not what our members needed from us. As we rethink this flow, we're focused on anticipating our members' needs ahead of time. We want to prioritize productivity before socialization because, shocker, we talked to members and that's what they wanted. So we want to build the right experience for them at all costs. For example, we've heavily invested in mapping experiences internally for our growth team. Mapping experiences meaning like the layouts of our buildings. We've yet to turn this into a member-facing experience, and a mapping service can be very technically expensive to build. It's easier to build on the foundation that we already have instead of building a new foundation for a member-facing experience. But hospitality isn't easy. With the goal of delivering what our members need before they even know it, we work with our mapping technology teams to prioritize new services for member-facing maps. In every step of the onboarding process, from the email content to the login experience to each one of the screens in the onboarding flow itself, our goal is to provide instant value to our members, answering why at every single junction. Why are you doing this? What's the reason for this? How do I get value for this? Sure, we also want to know about what you like, your job, and kind of your background so that we can customize your experience across the product. But first, we need to show you our hospitality by welcoming you into your new space, preempting every request you may have to get settled. So at the beginning of this talk, I promised to tell you about a couple of things. The relationship between hospitality and technology, why I care so much about it, hospitality and tech in action, and why any of this matters. It's probably clear that having confidence in the prepay process mattered to Allie's parents, that a new onboarding flow will matter to new and frazzled members on their first day, and why I prefer Citi's customer service experience over Apple's. But the theme that's woven amongst all of these examples is that all of the company's approaches to hospitality differentiate them from their competition, and when done well, becomes inherently intertwined with their culture and reputation. It's no surprise that WeWork is willing to invest in the right digital experience for its members, because it already has done so. It's already embodied hospitality in the way that they've built community managers. Resi's motto, for example, is for restaurants by restaurants. So the idea of ingraining that hospitality that is so essential to their restaurant partners into the product highlights the alignment of Resi's culture and that of its clients. It takes a lot to build technology, and we all have our own research, UX, design, and data-driven approaches. But beyond all of that, I challenge you the next time you're making a product decision or redefining a roadmap to ask yourself, am I simply building the right experience for my users, or am I anticipating what they need before they even know themselves and delivering selfless, authentic, and open-hearted hospitality to them? I dare you to try the latter. I have a feeling it'll go over pretty well. And before you know it, you'll be up here talking about how you're building products that are helping to connect people by harnessing the genuine spirit of hospitality. Thanks, guys. Any questions? Yeah.
What do you see are the opportunities that you could exploit the benefit of the users, that where you could tie what you gain from the hospitality business at WeWork?
Yeah. So in addition to onboarding, which is something that I'm particularly passionate about, and even when I started that project at the beginning of last year to kind of relaunch the apps in this really big effort, I had brought up onboarding as something that I knew we needed to come back to. There's a smaller project that I'm also working on that is much harder. It's the concept of error messages, right? So when you walk into a restaurant, like I was talking about before, the experience of talking to a guest when you don't have a table for them is all about finding them options, right? Directing them to what they need. How can we make you happy, even though we don't really have what you want? If you think about the concept of an error message, something's gone wrong, right? Sometimes you know what's gone wrong. Sometimes it's technical and totally on the back end, and we can't even understand exactly to our users how we can direct them, right? But we generally don't do a very good job of even attempting that direction. And WeWork is, among many products that do this. It's actually kind of one of my pet peeves as a product person, right? If you can think about every opportunity for something, when something goes wrong, right, to an opportunity to help direct someone to a better place, right? It's essentially the same spirit of hospitality, right? Which is we can't always anticipate when something's going to go wrong, right? But we know that when we're there, how we can best recover from it, right? So in hospitality, we often call this service recovery. When someone comes in and has a bad experience for whatever reason, you want to reach out to them, offer them, your sincerest apologies that something went wrong, and re-invite them to come back so they have a better experience and they can see really what you're about. Maybe it was an off day, maybe it was something out of your control. And I kind of think of error messages as the same sort of thing, right? We can't always be our best. We're going to have some problems. But how do we recover from those instances in the meantime to make sure that our users are getting the information that they need to be unblocked, and move forward? Yeah. Oh, somebody hand at the same time. I think you went up first. Hi.
I'm Xavier. I have a question. Has there been an instance where maybe someone on your team wasn't, sipping on Kool-Aid, let's say, with regards to hospitality? How did you bring them on board?
Oh, such a great question, and I have a good answer for that. So at Resi, we had a bunch of really amazing senior engineers. And although there was a couple of hospitality professionals in the mix, it was still a very traditional tech startup company. I would talk to them about what it was like to stand at the front door and run reservations. And they just kind of glazed over a little bit, right? They wanted to do their work. They were really good at what they did. Over time, we kind of broke down these barriers. And it was actually kind of cool. We developed this very common language of like half tech, half restaurants. My brain was still operating in like the whole restaurant space, so I was like doing conversions as I was talking to them. But I think one of the things that made like the biggest momentum shift in that environment was that I asked them to go to a restaurant and stand next to the host stand and watch the users of the product. They were naturally a little uncomfortable and a bit scared to do it. And I basically said to them, as long as you smile, know where the bathroom is, people are going to ask you, you can point in that direction, and otherwise just say, give me one moment, the host will be right back and she can help you. Right? That's really all you need to get by. Train them. We practiced a couple of times in the office, and then they all went out and actually watched a busy night at a restaurant, a busy shift, and sat next to the hosts and watched the experience. They came back like absolutely floored, right? They were like, I had no idea that they would tap the screen so quickly, right? They knew the difference now between 20 milliseconds and 2 milliseconds. It was actually meaningful, right? And it helped them understand what hospitality is, right? And especially as far as like the tech side of things, when something isn't optimized and it's just working fine, right? But it's not really working at the pace that we needed to, or we're not something similar like when we have an input field for numbers and we're not automatically popping up the numbers keyboard versus the letters key card, how annoying that extra tap is, right? And so having them spend this time at the host stand and standing side by side with our users was really like the thing that, there were no more questions after that, right? Everyone got it. And we made it a part of the onboarding process for like new teammates, which was really great. And it's actually something we do at WeWork too, which is, I just had a new team join from an acquisition that came over. It's a bunch of engineers, designers, and we actually went to the move-in day at one of our buildings because there's this mass migration of people that move in and move out in like basically at the same time. and we sat and we watched the experience, and we talked to the CMs about what they do, what tools they use, how they manage the whole process. So I think that, especially in the hospitality realm, connecting with your users and understanding in real life what that process is invaluable. Okay, there was a couple more questions. I think you had one. Yeah.
So what would you say is your personal hospitality philosophy? Because I feel like as somebody who's actually passionate about hospitality, you have your own philosophy as to what it means when you're providing a service.
Yeah.
And how do you bring that into your daily work?
Yeah, so it's a great question, and it kind of challenges me to think about being able to articulate it more clearly, but I'm going to attempt. For me, it was really easy to be hospitable at a restaurant, right? There is this sense of every night things need to be resolved at the end of the evening, right? Like a service is complete, you're done, and you move forward to the next day. There are very few problems that go past that. You need to get a guest a glass of champagne, right? You need to come something off a meal. You can usually do that. When I started working in tech, it was a real adjustment to understand how to solve problems, right? And how to be patient, because things took a lot more time to get fixed, right? And what I ended up kind of working through with myself was this idea that every problem is an opportunity, right? And I don't necessarily think it's all that unique, but to embody it is really hard, really, really hard, right? And when you think about the challenges of larger teams, more diverse teams, right? Different sort of technology, it's a whole different development process overall, right? It's something that I try to keep like really close. And every time I get to the point that I want to rant and rave, sometimes you need that, it's okay, right? But like the way that you kind of get yourself out of that is like, how am I going to make this better for the person that's having a problem that's blocking me from what I'm doing, right? Or how am I going to educate someone to get them up to speed because I'm super overwhelmed and I need to like offload some of my work and I want to empower someone else to pick it up and feel confident. So I think I've tried to make that transition. It's not always successful, but it's definitely something I try to keep in mind.
Yeah. Partly you answered my question
Okay.
too. How do you identify the problem? How do you identify your customers' pain points?
Yeah. In hospitality, it's really easy. People tell you right away. With tech, yeah. It's actually a really good question, and it's something that we're exploring right now a couple different ways, right? We're really, really lucky to work with a great data science team, right? And we think about feedback loops in a lot of different ways. Right now, we're actually asking our members for a lot of different feedback, right? Through an in-app experience, through emails and surveys, at the greater WeWork level, right, of understanding your overall experience, but also at the really granular level of like, how is this experience in the app, right? How is this used? So it's a mix, right? And I'm not sure we found the perfect balance yet. But anytime we launch an actual feature, well, actually, let me back up. Because if we're thinking about the actual problems, what we really do is it's definitely a mixture, right? We look at like, usage metrics, right? We look at a lot of engagement. We look at how we launch certain things and especially compared across regions, right? One of the amazing advantages we have at WeWork is that we are so large and we can test things in different populations to understand. But we also go and talk to people a lot, right? We have, especially being based in New York, like I said, we have over 60 buildings, right? We have a very formal process for being able to interview and recruit and engage members, which is more along the lines of like, hey, we're going to give you some gift, right? And we're going to reach out and we'll do a research study. And it's really great to have that formal pipeline. But we can also just walk into a building, right? And sit and like make a sign that says, come talk to me. I'd love to hear about your experience, right? And given the environment and the culture that I've already kind of talked about, this concept of hospitality, and certainly at WeWork, a lot of community, we kind of get those responses. We get people to come to us and share those pain points. The other way that we kind of capture a lot of that information is that the relationship in between our community managers and our members is really strong. Like there's just this amazing trust there. So we hear a lot from members to CMs, and our CMs come to us and say, hey, we consistently heard this, right? Then we take that information, if we haven't heard from another building in a certain period of time, and go, hey, we had an inkling that this was wrong, right? Like, is this going on as well? Have you heard this? And we've actually created some really amazing feedback loops company-wide to say, this amazing channel that we have with our CMs, we're getting all this feedback. We want to make sure it's being actually disseminated to the right people and that we're taking action on it. So it's a complicated metric for sure, but I think that we're actually really lucky in that people really want to come talk to us and ask. because it's where we bridge this physical and this digital world so well that I think we really have like an advantage there.
So, I think in my mind, hospitality industry, like you understand the value of experience very well. So something beyond a product, so there's something that is a additional factor, and this creates like a brand stickiness. How can people outside of hospitality think about creating this experience for their users in that regard?
Yeah, sure. It's great to have had the experience that I had opening restaurants. It put me, like you said, at the forefront of this and just really understood it really quickly. But I think that if you challenge yourself as anyone walking around in New York to pay attention to those experiences, it's why I started off this conversation by saying like, hey, has anyone had like a barista that remembered their name, right? Like, or someone that, told them their suitcase was unzipped, right? There are so many small experiences that really embody that hospitality atmosphere, right? Go to a restaurant. I know it sounds silly. Go to a restaurant, go to a bar and pay attention, right? Go to a really nice one. Like save up and go and have that fancy meal somewhere where they are known for hospitality. Or even better yet, call them on the phone, right? See how they talk to you. See what their responses are. And I say that because this industry is built on it, right? And I'd love to say there are other industries that are as good. I don't know of any. I'm happy to be challenged and like to hear about them, right? But this is essentially the core of what the restaurant and bar industry is about. And if you take those opportunities to kind of challenge yourself and make sure you're in there and you're kind of surrounding and immersing yourself in that world, even if it's a conversation, like I said, over the phone without having to make a reservation, call someone and be nice but be difficult, right? Like challenge them to meet your needs when you're on the phone with them or to walk in someplace and be a little bit, difficult. You'll see how they react. Luckily, it's an easy experience for all of us to have, and then to think about how that really translates to other aspects of what we're doing.
So I think something like one personalization is something different. How can you translate that towards like strengthening the relationship the consumer has with your brand?
Well, I think it goes to the core, and I was talking about this a little bit before, of good product and good UX, right? They're not all that far apart, right? You're trying to understand your users' needs and build the right product for them. The only way you can do that is if you're actually in touch with your user, in the same way that hospitality professionals have to have meaningful relationships with everyone that walks in the door, right? If you're missing that direct connection to your users, you're probably not going to be able to deliver a hospitable experience. Nevertheless, just a basic good UX, right? They're almost like levels of one another. So I'd encourage you to find the people that are using your product, sit with them, do the right sort of testing, do the right sort of interviews, right? There's so many different ways to do it. If you have, designers and data scientists available to you, embrace them, research it, and go that way. Because I think that the closer you get to those pain points, the more you'll understand them, and the better you'll be able to deliver on a good experience, and then an experience that anticipates all of someone's needs, which is really when you're breaking into that hospitality level. Does that answer your question? I think that's the right starting point for sure. Yeah.
As WeWork scales up, this process of optimization will take some more of the significance. So I was wondering, what are the immediate challenges you think you're facing right now?
Can you be a little more specific?
So in terms of, you touched on it with onboarding, error responses, and also with respect to how the technical people would have to understand the users.
Yep.
By going out there and experiencing, the hospitality.
Yeah.
What have you. So, in terms of platform, though, what do you see any innovations that need to be made?
Yeah, I think you spoke a little bit to it, which is we have to understand how to scale what we're doing, right? So one of the kind of unique challenges to WeWork now is that we're also experimenting with lots of different membership types, right? So you can be a member who doesn't necessarily have like a home base building, right? You can travel between lots of different buildings. So when we think about this experience, right, we've traditionally thought about this relationship that always starts with WeWork, really with your CM, even before it does the technology, right? There's this really stable person that's always going to be around. And they are there really to solve all your problems. I cannot stress that enough. The problem is that when you become more mobile in your membership and you're bouncing in and out of different buildings, you're not going to have that same relationship with a singular CM, right? And we assume that relationship is built over time, although it's always a great first impression, right? How do we figure that out and accomplish that without having that permanence there, right? We could bring that into the technology, right? It's not one for one. It's not going to be the same. But we have to figure out how to do that to really support new business lines, product changes, and that sort of a thing. It's one example of like some of the challenges that we're facing to make sure that we're scaling that level of hospitality.
Thank you.
Awesome, yeah.
When they talk to you about the technical difficulties,
Yeah.
how do you understand what's the best way they talk to you on, and how do you understand this?
Sure, yeah. So the question was essentially in working with engineers, how are they able to best describe some of the technical problems to me so that I understand it and I can work with them to come to a solution? It's actually kind of simple, right? We always make sure that we are doing things that are solving a problem, right? We don't need to be doing work if we're not solving a problem. And I'm even talking about technical debt, right? Like we should be focusing on things that will actually make an impact to our users, even if they're 2 or 3 steps away, right? We always need to be focused on solving a problem. And in fact, like when we think about writing tickets, right, on a product management board, it's really easy for an engineer to write a ticket that's very, technical, jargony, honestly, things that I probably won't understand. And if they ever do that, I say, nope, start again, right? What are we solving here? What are we actually doing? So if we create this culture, we're all accountable to solving the same user problems, right, which we are. We're naturally going to find this differentiation between engineers who are empowered to think more technically about things, right, but stay focused on the overall experience. And on my side, being more strategic and thinking overall how we're planning and how this all comes together. But no one's off the hook for thinking about user problems.
So, coming from a space personally that's in hospitality and as a new entrant in the aviation industry that's not very hospitality focused, more like regulations and safety, which is super important.
Sure.
How do you meld user experience and
Compliance. Yeah.
yes.
I hear you. I have to say, I don't have a ton of experience with this, and I think I've been lucky enough to work in a bunch of places that are decently unregulated in that sense. But at the same time, when GDPR came up last year, we had to make lots of changes. For us, it was more on the process side, right? It wasn't really around the experience and the strategy. But it still was this concept of like, how do we interact with members in the right way to make sure we're legally compliant for everything and we're not breaking any laws. We're not intending to, right? Like we have to make sure we're saying the right things. And this actually comes up a lot when we have to get, one of the parts of onboarding is that we have to essentially verify your identity for security reasons for our building. And people don't love that. Right? You basically take a picture of your government ID back and forth, take a picture of your face, and we constantly hear negative comments about like, what are you doing with my information? Why are you capturing all this, blah, blah, blah. One of the ways in which we're rethinking this is what I was talking about before, which is why, right? Like, I'm not going to try to scare members that like security is important in our buildings. It's not a scare tactic, right? But it is, right? And if we have this shared culture where we're accountable to one another, we can actually complete that. It's different from what you're asking, but that's how I've dealt with in the past, right? I think that the best way to approach something like that is to kind of put it all together, right? Like, let's put it all out there. What experience, if we didn't have any of the regulations, right, what experience would we want to deliver, right? Blue sky. What's our goal here? Then when we start layering in those compliance issues and that regulation, where do we have to compromise? And where can we push? I'm not saying push on the laws, right? But like push on the things that traditionally have been the right path forward, right? What are other people doing and how are they dealing with this, right? Where are we seeing like best in class approaches? And I imagine it's going to be from a lot of different places, right? All pulled together. But I think that sometimes starting with that big picture of where you want to be and then layering in the realities of certain things can at least help you have a North Star that you can stay focused on.
Hospitable environment for this tech program, but it's the application. I mean, based on the
Yeah. So way to end with a hard question. Thank you. So the question was about how, if I'm building a dream team to build a new product that's really focused on hospitality and technology, what sort of backgrounds would I look for people? There's two ideas here, right? The first is I want to build a team of experts, right? In any really good product, 5 is a lot. I'd actually even like challenge myself to say 3 when you're thinking about startups and really early stage stuff, but let's go with 5, right? I want a product person, right? The strategy person. I want the right engineers, which maybe are 2 depending on the product that we're building, if it's mobile, right? I want a designer and I want a data scientist, no doubt, right? Amongst us, we would all handle support. Amongst us, we would all handle account management, right? All of those functions that are required for maintaining accounts and having that interface with our users, that is shared responsibility, no doubt. Same way in which we were asking before about how to communicate with engineers about technical problems, we have to stay focused on our users. That's what we're here for. Beyond those skill sets, I want someone who's been in each one of those fields for like less than half of their careers, right? Like I want people who have done other things, because the diversity of experience is so, so rich, especially on small teams. But I think that in a bigger environment, it's the same thing, right? You essentially don't really have duplicity for everything, right? You need people to share in a lot of those experiences that are going to make the holistic team. Even today, right, I honestly think about some of the people I work with who have been doing product for maybe 12 years, and I'm like, that's incredible. I can't even think about like how much you have fine-tuned this skill set. But I also think about my own experience as like, hey man, I'm doing okay, right? Like I've challenged myself and definitely invested in classes, time, books to get up to speed in this world. But I have this whole other background of what feels like kind of 2 careers, right? In dealing with people, right? Teams, users, stakeholders, right? That are never the same. And I think that it's always important for all of us to kind of shake things up, right? Like I'm someone who's clearly, I handle risk okay. And I know that not everyone does that, but there's still ways you can be really calculated in your career in thinking about having diversity of experiences, right? To be this more holistic person than to be able to just be like a singular focus on something. So I definitely prefer people with unusual backgrounds and a breadth of experiences over expertise, because I think it's something you can gain pretty quickly.